Welcome to Game Set Matchup, the podcast where we talk everything partnerships, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Welcome to Game Set Matchup, the podcast where we discuss all things partnerships. I'm your host, Greg Watson. Please welcome our guest today, Natalie Izzard, Head of Partnerships at the Electric Car Scheme. Natalie, hello and welcome.
Hello, Greg. Absolute pleasure to be here for my first ever podcast.
Well, TGIF, happy Friday. Your first ever podcast and your first date now with water, I believe.
Yes, I've been a victim of the this ongoing drama in Crystal Palace and the surrounding areas, but I'm delighted to confirm I have now had a shower.
Well, you're going to have to celebrate this evening with a glass of champagne and another hot shower.
Yeah, seconded.
Well, look, starting with an overview, perhaps an introduction to yourself, perhaps you can tell our listeners a little bit more about who you are, your background and your current role, and a little bit more about the Electric Car Scheme.
Yeah, of course I can. So, as you mentioned, I'm currently the head of partnerships at the Electric Car Scheme. Before that, I was at Octopus, who I'm sure lots of you will know. I cut my teeth back in the day in kind of the youth charity sector, moving into ed tech as well during the pandemic, which was an interesting time to be working in education, I must say.
Yes.
Yeah, for all the obvious reasons.
How did you find? I mean, how did you find that?
So I think what was odd about it was obviously like the show quite literally had to go on. You can't have children, especially for how long we ended up being kind of, limited on what we could do, not learning for. So my partnerships role there actually evolved quite dramatically from being more business to business, the usual stuff that you would get up to suddenly looking at, how can we move curriculum online and how can we work to do that and make it more accessible and cheaper for schools and all sorts. So yeah, very dramatic time.
I don't know how you did it, but credit to you because you actually did something meaningful. But you moved on to Octopus.
Yes. So I was at Octopus for around 3 years actually, which was kind of probably my first big sector shift that I've done in my career, and probably the only one so far actually, because I'm still working in the electric vehicle biz. But I'd moved to Octopus to look after the partnerships function, and I did that for a few years, alongside dabbling with a bit of customer success work with an amazing team doing that as well.
How did you find? Because I've done this, and I've made the conscious decision in my career to move between industries, and I can tell you more about that and why a little if we get a chance later. But how did you find that difference in sector in terms of kind of practicing partnerships, as it were, or did you find any difference?
So it's like my worst kept secret that I'd never driven an EV before I joined there.
Brilliant.
And so I think probably, at our core as partnerships professionals,
Yep,
the skills we have are so transferable, right? You can talk
absolutely.
to anybody. I kind of pride myself on the fact that I can probably pick up a brief and deliver a presentation on it in a matter of like an hour.
Yeah,
But having to try and unpack this massive growing scaling up business that was Octopus, but then also trying to understand how electric cars worked. And I remember asking questions like, can you stall them, and people being like, well, no.
so, no, but that's a perfectly reasonable question. Why not?
I mean, I did at the time.
Yeah,
But I think, once you get your head around the content, I think in partnerships jobs, it is pretty, you can
I
go,
agree.
okay, right, I can get people to buy into me. I know how to go out and find new partnerships. I know what a good partnership looks like. So I can kind of copy and paste that bit.
I agree. I actually started. I won't go into this. Is about you. I won't go into too much information. But I actually made the conscious decision when I started my career after graduating to. I wanted to do what I'm doing now and
Mm,
be a startup person or run a company, whatever it might be. And I just had this thought that wouldn't it be good if I got to that point having as much experience across as many different industries as possible, all within kind of partnerships and marketing, if you like. And so I worked across telco, FMCG, financial services. And I remember when I was going from different roles, and I'd always be there for quite some time,
mm,
each role that is, and could point to the achievements. um, some people who I was interviewing with got that strategy and others didn't. And the ones that didn't, easy to say I didn't continue with them. But the
mm.
ones that did, fantastic. So I think people that have got lots of different sector experience, I think it's fantastic because I don't think it, I don't mean to, I'm not denigrating different sectors whatsoever, but you don't need to be an expert, in my opinion, in the sector, but as a partnerships person, how to, as you say, create partnerships. You know how to ask the right questions, how to create solutions together and
Mm.
doing it together. I don't think you need to be a sector expert. I think it's actually more
Yeah.
beneficial if you're not.
It's interesting. That's just made me think of a quote that There's a chap called Sean Phillips who is the
Mhm.
partnerships director at Illumity. He's fantastic. When I first met him, he said, "I'm an inch thick and a mile wide."
I
And I
like
was
that.
like, that I think it's a recruitment term back in the
I like
day,
that.
but I just thought, what a funny expression, and it kind of captures, I think, partnerships at its essence so well.
It does. Why do you need to be a mile wide? You don't. You can be just an inch wide, but actually you got all the resources and people within
Mm.
your team, who are the subject matter experts. Our roles as partnerships people is surely to reach out and create, well, partnerships, but you don't
Exactly.
you can bring the subject matter experts with you. But no, it's good to meet a fellow evangelist when it comes to crossing crossing sectors. I think it's pretty powerful. Linked to that, I guess, because I know that our listeners will be very keen to hear, and I appreciate you haven't been at the electric car scheme for
Yeah.
that long, nearly a year, nearly half a year, I should say. I'm so sorry. But how have you seen the electric car scheme's approach change since you've been there when it comes to creating partnerships, if at all?
Yeah. So what's really exciting about the electric car scheme and joining the business when I did was that they've just gone through Series A funding, so there's clearly lots of momentum in the business and a big drive from the C-suite board for the partnerships function to succeed. So in its first kind of iteration, I was pushing on an open door, which was amazing. And I think in terms of like how I think change is a really interesting question when looking at
Mm,
moving to a direct competitor in the same sector, but also into a company that doesn't have an established partnerships function already, right? And I think you know our brand is relatively new compared to some of the others in the landscape, and it's a super competitive landscape as well.
yes.
For lots of reasons. Um, and we're also branching out into Germany, so that there's all of these moving parts. And so joining a business, I think, in partnerships at that stage is super rewarding, but not for the faint-hearted, I will say.
Well, on
um,
that, so go on, keep going. Please keep going. I'm so
no,
sorry.
no, no. Over to you.
Well, no, no. I really want to ask this question, which is not on our script, as it were. But why did you choose to join yet another startup slash scale up? Because that's because, as you say, not for the faint-hearted. I use that
Mm.
expression God knows how many times a day. It's true. It's true. You could have gone to work for a more established company in
Mm.
a very senior role. All the above. Why did you choose to do another one of these?
I think people the personalities are well suited to certain kind of businesses at their stages in their development, right? And
Mm.
I have worked in so many weird and wonderful, businesses at different times in I've never worked for a big, big massive corporate, And I think there's on a selfish level where it's I don't like being a, small fish in a big pond.
Yeah.
But I think on a professional level, it's so much easier to make impact, and you're really close to the decision making center of a business, and also you're joining a business at its arguably most exciting phase, which
Mm.
is you know lots of investment. You've got a core group of people who've probably been with the business since its infancy. At the electric car scheme, there's this core group people. Our marketing director hit his 3-year anniversary today. One of the guys in my team, he joined partnerships and business development at the electric car scheme, and that's his career and he loves it. And I think that's really unique to get exposure to people who are genuinely that passionate, because they've been there at the beginning when they don't even have an office, and
Yeah.
they are all kind of fingers and toes and eyes crossed that the proposition's going to work. And I just don't think you get that maybe as much in bigger enterprise businesses.
Well, I mean, I worked for many large enterprise businesses before this, Visa, T-Mobile, various others, and had a wonderful corporate career, no question. But I think going into a startup, it couldn't be any different. And it's interesting when we bring people into the business, particularly who are coming from corporates, and
Mm,
you appreciate so you haven't got this precedent, which I think is a massive advantage for you. But people that are coming from corporates, we're at pains to explain how frenetic, how fast paced the culture is, and how if something doesn't exist, you have to create it. And it can sound, if you're not careful, really exciting. But then we have to kind of like roll back, and we want it to make it exciting, but we also want to make it real as well. But
mm,
we find that often people coming in from corporates, perhaps find it a little more challenging than they might have expected because they're not used to creating things from scratch, or that perhaps that pace. And so I think for you, God, you're in an incredible place because it's all you've ever known, as it were.
Yeah.
So I
And
think,
to your point there, I think that's exactly right. If I think that there is a integration or a build that's worth resourcing, I can put 15 minutes in the CTO's diary, and
yeah.
you can't do that in
No.
bigger businesses.
No, you can't. You have to go through. I mean, there's many benefits of bigger businesses, but with that example, you'd have to go through multiple layers to get to the CTO's 2, 3, 4 levels below.
Mm, yeah.
And that would just be to get to that person. Then there would be however many levels to then and processes to get to the CTO. So yeah, but this is definitely one for if we introduce a podcast around culture. This is definitely one to talk about the corporate versus the startup. But
Isn't it? But I
I
think what's
go on,
really
go, go, go.
interesting. No, I said what's really interesting from a partnerships perspective, though, in scale ups is that,
You can move.
and but also you often the people you're partnering with are not in scale ups.
Hmm.
And so
That's a good
one
point.
maybe one of the things that I think is interesting about change and also kind of taking core teams on a journey as somebody building a new partnerships function is that the way we do things might not be the way anyone else does.
How do you deal with that? Because before we started recording, we were talking about some banks, for example.
Mm,
And if you haven't, you will soon. It's working with banks. Well, in
yeah.
fact, it doesn't actually matter. Any large enterprise business, yeah, they work at a different pace. How do
Mm,
you find that? Coming
yeah.
in, presenting the opportunities, starting to define the partnership, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, Natalie, yeah, love it, love it, love it. Now we've got to go through these 10 steps or 20 steps. How do you find that? How do you deal with that? That's a really good point.
Oh, Greg, I feel like you're re-traumatizing me from a
Sorry.
previous. No, so I have lived this, and
It's
so
hard.
yeah, with one of the big banks, remain nameless for today, but
Okay.
the it got off the ground. The core team were amazing, but it took 2 years.
Yeah, that's actually about average.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I
To put it
think the
mildly.
the
Yeah.
bit that's the bit that there's kind of two things there that you have to manage, which is your own motivation and keeping your team motivated, updated, and saying, this is going to deliver what I need it to deliver, but not even in this financial year, right? And, going through various pilots, lots of milestones to hit that may not be super tangible to people outside of the team.
Or
They
relevant.
might not understand that actually something getting through risk committee is massive.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's quite hard as a partnerships professional to celebrate the successes with your team and the business and make sure they understand what you're doing, because you're there going, I promise I'm working really hard, but this
Yeah.
won't come off just yet.
And 2 years. Sorry, I'm so sorry. After you, I'm so sorry. I keep doing that.
No, it's all right. I was just gonna say the other element is then, as to our point earlier around almost being able to have to put a different, face on for who you're speaking to, which
Yeah.
you take for granted how difficult that can be sometimes, right? If you're 1 minute speaking to some really cool fintechs or green techs and talking about a partnership, the way you're going to interact is very different. And this sounds so obvious, but I think people do forget. And then you might have to be going in to a head office in Canary Wharf, suited and booted, ready to really dive into the real minutiae of a contract that, has been through several reviews already.
Yeah, it's really hard, and 2 years. I didn't raise any eyebrows because that's how long
Mm,
I would say two to 3 years is on average how long it takes. I think from the initial conversation from a startup and scale up through to going with an established
mm.
organization. Again, perhaps this is for another podcast at some point, but that is terrifying. One of the main reasons why startups and scale ups fail is because they run out of money. But it's not
Yeah.
surprising that you've got to fund it for 2 years before
Mm,
you can even, and that's not even before you necessarily make any money.
yeah.
So it's so yeah, but this is why I think partnerships people are the I need to think of the right expression. The true, not the true champions. Everyone's a champion, but I think the many faces that we have to wear. which makes us sound disingenuous, which we're not actually. It's not in the slightest bit disingenuous. But the many faces and the many roles that we have to play, maybe that's a better way of putting it, is vast, and
Hmm.
you have to be them all the time, because you have to, as you say, keep your internal stakeholders engaged, keeping them updated why we're going through this risk assessment and why it's important to them. Equally the board, your board, and then equally the people on the other side. And then developing the go-to-market plan for external consumers. It's a lot.
Yeah, a
Um,
lot.
it's funny actually. Someone actually said to me recently, and this will come on to the next question in a moment, but we were talking about what constitutes kind of like a partnerships person, and most people don't come into a partnerships role. Most people have either come from another function, whether it's sales,
Mm.
marketing, law, innovation, product, and then the person that I was talking to on the podcast a few weeks ago, we suddenly got to the conclusion that partnerships teams are these often become these all-star teams, because within the team you've got former salespeople, former marketing people, lawyers. So actually you've got all of this expertise within this partnerships team. We thought, wow, this is quite something, and I hadn't thought of it like that before.
Yeah, got a key person dependency.
Yeah, yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, well, or you could do it all ourselves. But moving on before I get us into trouble. But looking at partnerships a little bit more deeply, if we may. I mean, because after all, they are the lifeblood of businesses. What's your definition of a business partnership, and how do you go about creating them?
Mm. Definition is a hard question, isn't it?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think, when it comes to partnerships, they've all meant something slightly different everywhere I've worked. And I think when you try to explain to somebody who doesn't do partnerships or works alongside a partnerships team, they often don't have a clue what you
no,
do. And I think
no.
often they think that you're just going for lunch and getting invited to golf days.
Sales an account manager. Yep,
Yeah,
yep,
and
yep,
you have to say no. There's a lot going on here. I think
yep.
in my experience, though, the main themes probably that run across every partnerships team I've been part of is that, you're driving business growth, right?
Yep.
And that will be through a strategic relationship of some sort, whether that's in direct sales, marketing, business development, and you're a revenue center. A
Mhm.
good partnerships team, in my view, should be contributing a significant portion of the business's revenue if
Agree
it's done
entirely.
right.
Yep.
I think the other part is around that relationship building. As to the point we made earlier about, a contract negotiation might last 2 years. You need to have people that are resilient enough to do that, but also have the personalities to be able to take their stakeholders, both internal and external, on that 2-year journey, right?
Yeah.
People buy from people.
Yep.
Often, partnerships people will be very personable, and will build good relationships. And then I think the kind of third element I would say in the themed, it's around, you know, being creative, being a problem solver, and you will have to be when you're designing a business partnership in this way. At some points legal, at some points marketing,
Mhm.
at some point business development, at some point partner account management, and all of those things come with their own problems that need to be solved and other resources you need to pull in. I think when you go to that point around creating them, my sticking points with any partnership I try and get off the ground is, what is the goal?
Yeah.
I think people get very bogged down in these two brands look really great together.
Yes. Yes.
And then they'll think about the goal afterwards.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And you're like, no,
True.
you'll
Hang on a
probably
minute.
get to the same two brands maybe as a conclusion, but you also might not. But start with that goal. Are you growing revenue? Is it a brand partnership? Is it about supporting your existing customer base? What is it? And then I think probably the other thing, kind of more a bit like advice, I would say, when you're looking at business partnerships, is do try and standardize what you can, because every partnership is different, but you'll be saving yourself a lot of time and hassle if you can do anything to standardize some stuff, whether that's an onboarding journey, or you have a core introducer agreement that only has a few things that you can amend on it. Anything you can do to reduce the need to be doing it from the beginning every single time is helpful, but accept that every partnership will look slightly different.
It's such good. That's I was just smiling for so many reasons there. So the one of the, as you know, with our platform, so we make it easier to reach decision makers, and that's the problem that we're fixing with our platform. And one of the questions that we have with our onboarding as you create the profile is, what outcome do you want from having this discovery call? So you can have the discovery call with a company with MasterCard, Fortnum Mason, Disney, the electric car scheme, whoever. But what outcome do you want after you've had that call? And actually, and when we put that question in, it really forces people to think, oh, okay, what outcome do I want? And then how do I want to approach this call? And then do you want, to your point, do you want to create a product or service together? Do you want to stick your brands together? Do you want just a nice conversation? Do you want to do some co-marketing? What do you want to do? Do you want to make money, or do you just
Yeah.
want to? What do you want to do? I find it really interesting how a lot of people come to the partnerships table, whether it's the first discovery call or a little further forward, not being entirely clear what they want.
Mm.
And I find that interesting. Like as a human, I find that curious.
Yeah.
We don't take a little bit more time to think, okay, I can meet this company, I can meet this brand, but what do I want from it?
Mm.
Um, well, I guess again, this also links on quite nicely to our next question. So, for all the budding partnerships people, what advice would you give to your younger self starting out? Perhaps the do's and the don'ts of partnership creation and development.
Oh, I love this question.
Mm.
I'll split it into the do's, then the don'ts,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is probably the wrong way around, but never mind.
no, no,
Um, I'm a big advocate of trusting your gut when it comes to this stuff.
yeah,
You've been hired for a reason, you've got a skill set. So if you really do think that that partnership is going to work or that we need to flex on something, as long as you've got a rationale and you can evidence what you're thinking, go for it. You trust yourself. Um, I think go to as many events as you can.
completely. Yeah.
You know, I'm again a big advocate of this, and something that's really great about the electric car scheme team is that they give me a lot of autonomy to go out and network and meet people, which both gives me a lot of energy as an individual, but also is a great way of us getting our brand out there and speaking to people and getting both at industry events and stuff that's maybe kind of industry adjacent. And I think focus on, if you're somebody that likes the look of a partnerships career and you think, it feels really far away from me right now, have a think about the roles that I think will give you a good stepping stone. So
Mm.
marketing, account management, business development, sales, anywhere like that where you can really hone your skills in, understanding what consumers want, speaking to lots of different people. I've hired lots of partnerships people in my time, and those are the kind of things I look out for. I'm not expecting somebody to have got 10 years partnerships experience for a partnerships manager role necessarily, because there aren't as many partnerships roles as there are good people that could do them, right? So I think that's probably a few bits of the do's. Um, don't, I would say for me personally, is don't work somewhere that you're not passionate about in a partnerships role. It's a really tough job if you're not passionate. So I
Mm.
love sustainability. I think, what we do at the electric car scheme is incredibly exciting, looking out into Germany, the future product landscape we're looking to do to help people decarbonize their homes. I'm genuinely passionate about that. So when I'm having conversations with people about it and a conversation is taking longer than I want it to or whatever, I'm still motivated by that mission. I think also don't take advantage of your network. I have conversations with people today that I met in my first ever job in London in youth services. And, you suddenly I'd never thought that someone I met working in youth services would suddenly be a useful connection for me to have now in my role right now. And I just think so, never take that for granted, because the people you meet along the way, you never know where they're going to end up either. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with that. What's the whole expression around you will forget what perhaps people do, but you'll never forget how they make you feel
Mm,
as well. And I think surrounding yourself with people who support you, who have supported you along the way, I think is also particularly important. But that's fantastic advice. Is perhaps before coming into a partnerships role, perhaps consider a non-partnerships role.
mm,
Which, and I think that kind of goes back to what we was kind of talking about earlier, which is partnerships people often come from all
yeah.
parts of the universe, and I think it's quite unusual to come straight into partnerships. So I would kind of agree that maybe getting a little bit of experience in another discipline first could stand you in good stead. But I mean, I'm curious to see what the future holds for partnerships, because they're starting to become like the next CEOs, and they're starting to become the power engines of organizations. And we're starting to see like sales organizations perhaps slightly evolve into partnerships. And so partnerships has got, I think, a huge, powerful role to play going forward. I think we've just started to scratch the surface.
No,
But
I agree.
I suppose to round us off, I've got one last question, if I may.
Mm.
What does the future hold for businesses? What do you see the future holding for businesses when it comes to creating partnerships with each other? And what will you, if anything, and the electric car scheme be doing differently, kind of based on all the things that we've talked about, I guess?
Yeah, I think to your point, the future of partnerships is really exciting. When I first started working in partnerships roles, I didn't know of many other people doing it.
No, no, no.
And lots of businesses would have someone that they were calling a partnerships person, but they were basically doing pure play biz dev.
Yeah,
Um,
management.
yeah, and I think now what's really exciting is that it's such a growing area, and I think it's potentially been neglected by companies who maybe haven't seen the value the channel has, right?
I think
I've
that is, though.
say that
Why,
again.
why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think
I've got a
maybe
thought on it.
I think probably maybe the sales cycle
I think so.
potentially.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think
I
so.
also think maybe it's not as tangible in the, I've had this question when I've been KPIing partnerships teams, right? And you know, do you remunerate them based on the revenue the business is generating? Do you remunerate them on the number of contracts they've signed? There's a lot of other factors at play in
Mm.
that journey, which it's hard to work out how that fits into somebody's package or KPI or whatever that is. And I think sometimes maybe it's a bit too much of a headache.
I wonder whether obviously there's many reasons why, but I wonder whether I think one of the bigger reasons I think is around the sales cycle piece.
Mm,
I think that there's general in my humble opinion anyway, I agree with you because I think I think sales generally are historically seen as much faster.
yep.
But the downside of a sale downside is that it can often be seen, I think, as sometimes as a one-time transaction devoid of any
Mm,
long-term meaningful relationship or partnership. Whereas partnerships, by definition, take longer to cultivate because you've got to meet more people, you've got to get to know
mm,
the individuals more deeper, and so it is going to take longer. And so I can see how organisations, perhaps historically, not so much the case anymore, would be a little bit more
mm.
wary of investing in partnerships because they want a quick buck. But
Yeah.
there's now more of an understanding that actually longer term, more fruitful partnerships are going to yield much more profitable results over a longer period of time.
Definitely. And I think the trends that I think will probably start to emerge in the next couple of years, a lot of places this is already happening as well, I would say. But I think one that at the electric car scheme we're really looking at is data-led partnerships.
Mm,
And I think how you can share data, utilize tech, and really enhance partnerships that way, giving each other as much visibility of what's going on as possible, all of that stuff I think is really exciting. In every partnerships team I've worked in, I've always spent so much time with product and tech teams.
mm.
Whereas maybe other colleagues I know who have sales jobs might not even know who the product and tech guys are, guys and girls, I should say. And I think, that's really exciting. Like, get involved in that. Think about how data can work hard for you in partnerships. And the second one would be, which is a nice, relevant one for me, I suppose, which is using partnerships to support the wider ESG planning and strategy for your business. And I think, ESG is taking a big step into the spotlight. We all know this. And I think companies are looking more and more for partners that can contribute to their ESG goals. Whether that's, partnering with a B Corp, the electric car scheme is a B Corp, or it could be that they want to partner with somebody to deliver something that they can't deliver themselves, but will contribute to a green incentive that they have, or a key milestone for their net zero transition. And I think partnerships are a really great way to do this. So the advice I'd give to businesses thinking about how they can maybe inject a new lease of life into their partnerships functions maybe would be around that kind of data and the ESG element. I think that gets people really, really excited. And both of those things can help improve the partner experience, because if you've got that mutual value and that circle of value literally sounds like something from The Apprentice, doesn't it? I've just made
No,
up.
no, 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 no. No, I'm going to build on what you said in a minute. I don't agree with that, but go on, go on. I don't. I don't
Yeah.
agree. I
But
don't
I
agree.
think, the more you can do so that your partners feel like, you're giving them the insight they need, they're contributing to something exciting. Like, what's not to love?
Well, do you know why I don't agree that it sounds something off The Apprentice? Because a circle is round, and a circle is in constant keeping going. It keeps going.
Yeah.
It's been a long week. It keeps going, and actually, I think of a partnership as circular and as keeping going. And actually, with the sharing of data and information, two-way, it reinforces the partnership, because what any partnership is a relationship between two people or multiple parties. And so therefore they have to be, the successful ones, in my humble opinion, have to be on a constant circle, which is continually going around and continually feeding things into the middle.
Yeah.
And if that was on The Apprentice, then I think some people would do very well to adopt it.
Yeah.
But no, I agree. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, I think it's that thing around creating mutual value that isn't just commercial.
Yes.
Obviously the commercial stuff is what gets the decision makers out of bed in the morning and gets your contract signed, but the ongoing return on that partnership, like, I think people often forget about, like, the doers, in inverted commas. The person that signed your lovely introducer agreement is probably not the person that's actually getting the clients in front of your team, or getting your brand out there. And I think this stuff is the bit that motivates those doers and that keeps the partnership moving for year 2, 3, 4, however long it could be, alongside the kind of commercial element of it.
It's all the things that what we were both saying earlier, which is it's a lot of intangibles. There's a lot of tangible, quantifiable elements that go into a partnership agreement, but the intangibles, such as how you make people feel, and remembering birthdays and specific events, and it can sound soft, but all of these things contribute significantly to the relationship, to the partnership, which ultimately does deliver the commercials.
100%.
We're coming to an end, but I could talk to you for a great deal longer. Perhaps you could come back, actually, because there's something else I'd like to invite you to separately, which I'll share with you separately, to share some more advice and tips. But if I may, I wanted to say a huge thank you to Natalie Izzard, to the one and only Natalie Izzard, Head of Partnerships at the Electric Car Scheme. Thank you so much for joining us on Game Set Match Up and sharing your advice and tips when it comes to creating partnerships. And perhaps you could come back in a year or so's time to share how things are going.
Oh my God, Greg, that would be an honor. And thank you for making my first podcast experience so delightful.
Our pleasure. I was going to say something really dodgy then. I was about to say, enjoy the warm shower and champagne, which sounds very dodgy, but it is Valentine's Day, although my husband will find that amusing. Anyway, thank you. Take care, and we'll see you very soon.
See you soon.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks for joining this week's Game Set Matchup. Tune in to hear more about the need-to-knows and the do's and don'ts when it comes to creating successful business partnerships.